It was a foggy Monday morning at Fort Braddock Air Base, where steel giants lined the tarmac and the air thrummed with the hum of precision and order. Pilots in flight suits, engineers with clipboards, and stern-faced officers moved with rehearsed efficiency. Among them walked a man who no one paid much attention to, a Mason Hale, the janitor. Dressed in worn coveralls and pushing a creaky mop bucket, Mason had worked at the base for over 15 years. To most, he was invisible. He cleaned hangars, swept hallways, and emptied trash cans in briefing rooms without so much as a nod. Few knew his name. Fewer knew his story. Mason had a quiet way about him, stooped shoulders, graying beard, eyes that watched more than they spoke. He was punctual, polite, and seemingly ordinary. But he had a habit of lingering near the F-35 hangars, stealing glances at the cutting-edge $300 million jets, and listening closely to the conversations of young pilots. Some joked he was just an old man dreaming of flight. Others thought he was harmlessly eccentric. But no one imagined that Mason, the janitor with duct tape boots, once sat in a cockpit himself. Back in the late 90s, Mason had been a top test pilot with the Air Force. Brilliant, daring, and precise, he was chosen for missions most others feared. But after a tragic crash during a classified operation, one that took his co-pilot and left Mason injured and emotionally shattered, he vanished from the radar. He left active duty, buried his flight credentials, and retreated into civilian life. When he later took a job as a janitor at Fort Braddock, it wasn't out of necessity. It was a form of silent penance, a way to stay close to the sky without daring to touch it again. But life, as it often does, was preparing something unexpected. That morning, chaos broke out when a scheduled test flight of the base's most advanced F-35 went horribly wrong. The primary pilot was delayed by a family emergency. The backup pilot was found unconscious in his quarters, the victim of an unknown allergic reaction. Commanders scrambled. The aircraft, already fueled, programmed, and waiting, was needed in the sky for a high-priority stealth demonstration being broadcast live to NATO officials. A delay or failure would be catastrophic, both politically and technologically. And as pressure mounted, someone noticed Mason, standing quietly near the hangar, eyes fixed on the jet like he knew it intimately. "What are you doing here?" barked Captain Rourke, frustrated and under pressure. Mason, calm as still water, replied, "You need that jet in the sky." "I can fly it." The room froze. Laughter rippled, then faded when Mason recited, from memory, flight protocols that hadn't been used in years, technical specs, maneuvering codes, emergency protocols. His voice didn't waver. He wasn't joking. He wasn't desperate. He was ready. A few of the senior officers recognized his name, vaguely. And someone checked the records. Their jaws dropped. Mason Hale wasn't just a janitor. He was a legend who had disappeared. And now, against every rule in the book, he was asking for one last flight. They had no time. No other options. And the clock was ticking. The air in the command center was heavy with disbelief. Officers crowded around terminals while technicians scrambled to verify Mason's identity. The base commander, Colonel Sykes, stared at the old man standing in front of him. "Are you telling me you still remember how to fly an F-35? Mason simply nodded. His calm unnerved everyone. He wasn't asking for permission. He was offering a solution. The live demonstration was due in under an hour, and NATO delegates across the globe were already tuning in. The stealth jet was prepped, armed with non-lethal test equipment, and coded for secure flight, but without a pilot, the operation was doomed. Time was slipping away, and with each second, the possibility of humiliation on an international scale grew more certain. Colonel Sykes had never made a riskier decision, but he saw something in Mason's eyes, a fire that hadn't gone out. With a curt nod, he gave the order, "Suit him up." Inside the locker room, Mason peeled off his janitor's uniform and stepped into the flight suit like he'd never left it behind. His hands, once calloused from daily scrubbing, now moved with the precision of a veteran. Technicians rushed to adjust the helmet straps, surprised at how smoothly Mason handled the gear. One young pilot, Lieutenant Avery, looked on in disbelief. "Sir, you sure you're up for this?" Mason offered a rare smile. "Son, I was flying before you were born." Outside, the tarmac buzzed with urgency as ground crews cleared a path. The F-35, glinting like a blade under the afternoon sun, waited. As Mason climbed the ladder, something shifted in the air. The skeptical murmurs quieted. The moment his fingers gripped the cockpit's edge, they could all sense it. This wasn't nostalgia. This was instinct. He slid into the seat, flicked on the systems, and began the pre-flight checks without hesitation. The interface had changed over the years, but the soul of the machine hadn't. Mason spoke to the jet like an old friend. "Let's show them what we remember." The engines roared to life, a deep, bone-shaking growl that echoed across the base. Back in the control tower, eyes locked on the radar. Colonel Sykes stood frozen, headset pressed to his ear, listening. "Eagle 1, confirm takeoff," came the call. Mason's voice returned, clear and strong, Eagle 1 rolling. The jet surged forward. The wheels left the ground. And just like that, the Janitor was airborne. A gasp went through the observation deck. On the giant screen, the F-35 climbed into the clouds, cutting through them with impossible grace. Mason's hands danced over the controls like he'd never left the sky. He executed a perfect ascent, then flipped into a low inversion roll that made the watching NATO officials sit up straight. In less than 5 minutes, Mason had redefined what they thought they knew about military pilots. His maneuvers were not just flawless, they were art. He took the $300 million jet through an aerial routine so precise, so elegant, that the live feed viewers erupted in applause. Messages poured into the base's comms. "Who is that pilot? This is the best demo we've seen. Can we meet the commander of the aircraft?" No one could believe the truth, that the man flying the F-35 wasn't part of the pilot corps, but the Janitor they'd all overlooked for years. But back on the ground, even as jaws dropped and reputation shifted, Mason wasn't focused on praise. For him, it wasn't about glory. It was about something deeper, coming to peace with the ghosts that once haunted his cockpit. The jet sliced through the sky with stunning precision, weaving between cloud banks and dropping into impossible dives before soaring again like a phoenix. On the ground, stunned officers watched in silence, their earlier skepticism transformed into awe. Mason Hale, the man they'd passed in hallways without a second glance, was performing maneuvers most active pilots wouldn't dare attempt in a live demonstration. In the NATO control rooms across the globe, applause broke out in rooms where military officials once watched with folded arms. "Who is this man?" they kept asking. But Mason didn't hear any of it. Alone in the cockpit, high above the earth, he was somewhere else, somewhere between past and present, fear and redemption. It wasn't just a flight. It was a conversation with the ghosts of the past, with the co-pilot he'd lost years ago, and with the version of himself he thought had died in that desert crash. As the F-35 dipped into a low-speed hover and spun into a vertical climb, Mason could feel every breath of the machine. It didn't feel like 15 years had passed. It felt like home. In that silence above the clouds, he whispered, "We did it, Joel," honoring the name of the friend who never came back from their last mission. There were tears in his eyes, but his hands never trembled. On the ground, Colonel Sykes and the other officers stood in silence. When Mason finally returned for landing, the tower held its breath. With the calm of a man in full control, he brought the jet into a perfect glide, wheels kissing the tarmac like silk. The base, stunned for so long, erupted in applause the moment the jet rolled to a stop. Ground crews dropped tools. Engineers clapped. Even junior cadets stared with wide eyes. For a moment, ranks and uniforms meant nothing. A man had done something unforgettable, not because he had to, but because he could. Mason climbed down from the cockpit, sweat on his brow, the flight suit clinging to him like armor. Colonel Sykes approached slowly, disbelief and admiration battling in his expression. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone who you were?" he asked. Mason shrugged lightly. "I wasn't sure I deserved the sky anymore," he said softly. "But I guess it wasn't done with me yet." A long silence followed, Then the colonel extended his hand. You just saved this base's reputation and reminded everyone what true skill looks like. Word spread fast. By the next day, Mason's story was everywhere. Headlines blared, Janitor turned fighter pilot stuns military and NATO's, and the ghost pilot returns. News crews camped outside the base. Former comrades reached out. A request came from the Pentagon for Mason to join the Advanced Flight Advisory Board. But Mason declined every interview. He didn't want fame. He didn't want promotions. All he wanted was peace, and he finally had it. Weeks later, he quietly returned to his janitor role, though things were never the same. Now, people greeted him with respect. Young pilots often stopped to ask questions. Sometimes, when he passed the hangars, the crews would salute without a word. They didn't salute the uniform. They saluted the man who reminded them that greatness doesn't always wear stars. Sometimes, it carries a mop and flies.